My sister sneered at my nephew's birthday, calling me a loser, while I funded her lavish party. Then I walked out, leaving her to face the bills, and my phone erupted with 19 desperate calls. The summer sun blazed over the suburban sprawl of Maplewood, Virginia, casting a golden haze on the manicured lawns and pastel-colored houses. I stood on the porch of my sister's modern colonial home, clutching a vibrant gift bag stuffed with presents and a meticulously wrapped Lego castle set for my nephew, Ethan. The air buzzed with the distant shrieks of kids playing in the backyard, and a garish, "Happy 8th birthday, Ethan" banner fluttered above the door, its neon letters glinting in the light. Balloons, electric blue and screaming yellow, bobbed against the railing, tethered like reluctant party guests. The scent of grilled burgers and sugary frosting wafted through the air, promising a celebration. I adjusted my grip on the gift bag, my heart thudding with a mix of anticipation and dread. At 32, I'd grown used to the undercurrent of tension at family gatherings, but today felt different. Today I was determined to prove I belonged. I rang the doorbell, the chime echoing like a warning. The door yanked open, and there was my mother, Patricia, her silver-streaked hair pulled into a tight bun, her floral sundress impeccable as always. Her smile, warm for a fleeting second, curdled into a grimace when her eyes landed on me. "Oh, you're here," she said, her voice sharp enough to slice through the humid air. I blinked, caught off guard. "Yeah, Mom, it's Ethan's birthday. Of course I'm here." Before I could step inside, a shadow loomed behind her. My older sister, Vanessa, 38 and radiating smug superiority, sauntered into view. Her designer sundress hugged her Pilates-toned frame, and her manicured nails tapped rhythmically against her crossed arms. "Wow, you actually showed up," she sneered, her lips curling into a venomous smirk. "What? Did you think Ethan needs his loser uncle crashing his big day?" The word loser hit me like a sucker punch, stealing the air from my lungs. I stood frozen, the gift bag crinkling in my tightening grip. "What's that supposed to mean?" I managed, my voice low but trembling with barely restrained fury. Vanessa laughed, a cruel, barking sound that echoed off the polished hardwood floors. "Oh, come on, look at you," she said, gesturing at my faded graphic tee, my scuffed sneakers, the faint stubble on my jaw. "You're a walking embarrassment. Ethan doesn't need his deadbeat uncle dragging down his party. Why don't you just go? Save us all the cringe." The porch seemed to tilt beneath me. I felt the familiar sting of their judgment, the way their eyes always lingered on my unpolished edges, my refusal to play their game of flashy cars and country club memberships. To them, I was still the gangly 15-year-old who spent hours hunched over a keyboard, coding games in our cramped basement while Vanessa charmed her way through cheerleading and prom courts. Never mind that I'd built a thriving freelance career as a cybersecurity consultant, pulling 6 figures from contracts with tech giants in Silicon Valley. Never mind that my patents for encryption algorithms had earned me quiet respect in the industry. To my family, I was a slob, a failure, a nobody. I glanced past Vanessa, hoping for an ally. My father, Greg, hovered in the hallway, his graying beard and wire-rimmed glasses giving him the air of a distracted professor. But his eyes darted to the floor, avoiding mine, his silence louder than any insult. My mother shifted, her lips parting as if to speak, but she said nothing. It was a rehearsed tableau, a silent agreement that I was the outsider. A memory clawed its way to the surface, raw and jagged. 6 months ago, Vanessa had shown up at my modest apartment in Richmond, her usual swagger replaced by a practiced vulnerability. "I'm in a bind," she'd said, her voice dripping with false humility. "Ethan's private school tuition is killing us. Just a little help, you know. I'd do the same for you." I'd wired her the money that night, $5,000, no questions asked, no strings attached. I'd done it for Ethan, for the bright-eyed kid who loved my goofy coding puns and begged me to build him Minecraft mods. And now here she was, spitting in my face. "Vanessa," I said, my voice steady despite the rage boiling in my chest, I paid for half this party. The catering, the bounce house, the damn cake, my money. Her smirk didn't falter. Oh, please, she scoffed. You think that makes you special? Throwing cash around doesn't make you family. It just makes you desperate. The words landed like a blade, slicing through years of unspoken resentment. I could feel the heat rising in my face, the urge to scream, to demand an explanation, to force them to see me. But then I caught a glimpse through the window, Ethan, oblivious in his Spider-Man party hat, chasing his friends across the lawn, his laughter pure and untainted. He didn't know his mother was tearing me apart at the front door. He didn't know his grandparents were complicit in this ambush. For a moment, I considered storming in, handing him the Lego castle and pretending none of this had happened. But Vanessa's voice cut through again, sharp and mocking. No place for losers here, bro. Do us all a favor and disappear. That was it. Something snapped inside me, a brittle thread I'd been clinging to for years. I exhaled, slow and deliberate, and stepped back. Fine, I said, my voice cold as steel. If that's how you feel, I'm done. I turned, my sneakers crunching on the gravel driveway as I strode to my beat-up Honda Civic. The gift bag and Lego set landed in the passenger seat with a thud. As I slid into the driver's seat, my hands gripped the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles whitened. A cold, searing realization settled over me. I wasn't a brother, an uncle, or a son to these people. I was a bank account, a safety net, a fool who'd let them leech off me for years. No place for losers, huh? I muttered, my lips twisting into a bitter smile. Let's see how you do without this loser paying your bills. I peeled out of the driveway, the engine's roar drowning out the party's distant cheers. My phone buzzed in my pocket, probably my mother with her predictable, "It's not about the money, sweetheart," excuse. I ignored it. For the first time in years, I felt something dangerous and exhilarating, freedom. But freedom came with a price, and I knew the storm was coming. The house faded in my rearview mirror, but the sting of Vanessa's words clung to me like damp rot. I drove aimlessly through Maplewood's quiet streets, the suburban perfection mocking my unraveling. My phone kept buzzing, a relentless assault I refused to acknowledge. I pulled into a deserted park, the kind with rusted swings and overgrown grass, and cut the engine. The silence was deafening, broken only by the faint chirp of cicadas. I leaned back, staring at the gift bag in the passenger seat, its cheerful wrapping paper now a cruel irony. I thought of Ethan, his gap-toothed grin when I'd shown him how to code a simple animation last Christmas. "You're the coolest uncle ever," he'd said, his eyes wide with awe. That memory clashed violently with Vanessa's sneer, my parents' silence, the way they'd all agreed I didn't belong. I wasn't just angry, I was gutted. For years, I'd convinced myself that my sacrifices, my late nights debugging code, my quiet generosity, would earn me a place at their table. But I was wrong. They didn't see a successful coder, a loyal brother, a devoted uncle. They saw a loser in a wrinkled tee, a nobody who didn't fit their polished, Instagram-worthy lives. My phone buzzed again, and I finally glanced at it. 7 missed calls, 4 from Mom, 2 from Dad, 1 from an unknown number. A text from Vanessa popped up. Real mature, storming off like a baby. Grow up. I laughed. A harsh, hollow sound. Grow up? She was the one throwing tantrums when her credit card got declined. I powered off the phone and tossed it onto the dash. I needed silence, a chance to let the venom of their betrayal drain away. But silence didn't last. As I sat there, a new figure emerged in my mind. Not Vanessa or my parents, but someone I hadn't seen in years. Aunt Carla, my mother's estranged sister. She'd been the black sheep, the one who'd walked away from the family's suffocating expectations to run a dive bar in Charleston. I was 10 when she'd pulled me aside at a tense Thanksgiving, her leather jacket smelling of cigarette smoke and rebellion. "Kid," she'd said, her voice gravelly, "don't let these people define you. They'll bleed you dry if you let them." I hadn't understood then, but now her words echoed like a prophecy. Maybe it was time to find her, to see if she'd escaped the same trap I was clawing my way out of. I started the car, a plan forming. I wouldn't just disappear. I'd make them feel my absence, let them choke on their own arrogance. Vanessa thought she could mock me while spending my money. Let's see how her perfect life held up without my checks. As for Ethan, I'd find a way to be there for him, on my terms, not theirs. The road stretched ahead, and for the first time in years, I felt like I was driving towards something real. The neon glow of Richmond's skyline flickered against the dusk as I pulled into the parking lot of my apartment complex, a squat brick building that screamed functional rather than fancy. My phone, still powered off, sat like a ticking bomb in the cup holder. I grabbed the gift bag and Lego castle set from the passenger seat, their cheerful wrapping now a bitter reminder of the afternoon's betrayal. Vanessa's venomous words, "No place for losers," looped in my head, each syllable a fresh wound. At 32, I'd endured my family's disdain for years, but today was different. Today they'd crossed a line and I was done playing their punching bag. Inside my apartment, the familiar chaos greeted me. A cluttered desk strewn with energy drink cans, a glowing monitor displaying lines of Python code, and a half-eaten pizza box teetering on the couch. It wasn't the polished life Vanessa flaunted on Instagram, but it was mine, earned through sleepless nights securing networks for tech giants, debugging algorithms that kept corporations humming. I dropped the gifts on the kitchen counter and sank into my desk chair, the weight of the day pressing against my chest. I wasn't just angry. I was hollowed out, gutted by the realization that my family didn't see me as a person, only a resource to exploit. I resisted the urge to turn on my phone. I knew what awaited me. My mother's guilt-tripping texts, my father's spineless pleas for reason, maybe even Vanessa's smug taunts. Instead, I opened my laptop and stared at the code I'd been working on, a security patch for a Silicon Valley startup. The logic of it, the clean precision of if then else, was a balm to the chaos in my head. But my focus kept slipping, dragged back to the memory of Ethan's laughter in the backyard, oblivious to his mother's cruelty. I wanted to protect that kid, to shield him from the toxic mess his parents were brewing, but how? Every path seemed to lead back to Vanessa's outstretched hand, demanding more. A sudden impulse hit me. I pulled up my banking app and scrolled through my transaction history. There it was, $5,000 to Vanessa 6 months ago for Ethan's tuition, another $2,000 last year for her car repairs, $1,500 for emergency medical bills that mysteriously coincided with her spa weekend. The numbers stacked up, a ledger of my stupidity. I'd been their safety net, catching them every time they stumbled, and what did I get? A front row seat to their contempt. I slammed the laptop shut, my jaw clenched so tight it ached. No more, I muttered, the words of vow. I needed air, distance, something to drown out the noise in my head. I grabbed my keys and headed to the Rusty Anchor, a dive bar a few blocks away where the beer was cheap and the patrons minded their own business. The place was a relic, sticky floors, neon Budweiser signs, a jukebox blaring Springsteen. I slid onto a stool, ordered a stout, and let the hum of conversation wash over me. The bartender, a grizzled guy named Mike with a Marine Corps tattoo, gave me a nod. "Rough day?" he asked, sliding the pint across the counter. "You could say that," I replied, taking a long pull. I didn't elaborate, and he didn't pry. That was the beauty of dive bars. No one cared about your sob story unless you spilled it. But as I sipped, my mind drifted to Aunt Carla, the family rebel who'd warned me about their greed decades ago. I hadn't seen her since I was a kid, but her defiance stuck with me. She'd cut ties, built her own life, and never looked back. Maybe she had answers I didn't. I pulled out my phone, hesitating before powering it on. The screen lit up with a barrage of notifications, 19 missed calls, 12 voicemails, 28 texts. I smirked. They were panicking already. I skimmed the messages. Mom. I don't understand why you're acting like this. Vanessa didn't mean it. Dad. Let's talk this out, son. Family's complicated. Vanessa, you're such a drama queen. Ethan doesn't even miss you. That one stung, a knife twisted in an open wound. But then a surprise. A text from Nate, Vanessa's husband, a quiet guy who usually faded into her shadow. I'm sorry about today. It wasn't right. Can we talk? I raised an eyebrow. Nate, of all people, breaking ranks. That was new. I typed a quick reply. What's there to talk about? His response came fast. Vanessa's freaking out. She went overboard on the party. Caterers, a petting zoo, some fancy cake. She was counting on you to cover it. Now she's spiraling. I snorted, the beer nearly coming out my nose. Of course she was. Vanessa's life was a house of cards, built on my money and her delusions. Without me, it was collapsing. I texted back, define spiraling. Nate hesitated then. She's screaming at everyone, blaming your parents for not stopping you from leaving. She's talking about selling her jewelry to pay the bills. I leaned back, a grin spreading across my face. Vanessa, the queen of appearances, pawning her precious diamonds? That was poetic. For years, she'd mocked my cheap lifestyle, my used car, my thrift store wardrobe, while she flaunted her Tesla and Gucci bags, all propped up by my checks. Now the mask was slipping. I finished my beer, savoring the bitter tang, and ordered another. The bar's dim light felt like a cocoon, shielding me from the storm I'd unleashed. But the satisfaction was fleeting. Ethan's face kept creeping into my thoughts, his wide-eyed excitement when I'd taught him to code a pixelated spaceship game. He didn't deserve to be caught in his mother's mess. I needed a plan, a way to stay in his life without letting Vanessa sink her claws back in. That's when Aunt Carla's voice echoed again. Don't let them bleed you dry. I pulled up Google and typed her name, half expecting nothing. To my surprise, a hit. Carla's Roadhouse, a bar in Charleston, South Carolina, with a 5-star Yelp review praising the badass owner who takes no crap. That was her, all right. I saved the address. Maybe a road trip was in order. The next morning, I woke to a pounding headache and a phone still buzzing like an angry hornet's nest. I ignored the voicemails, more of Mom's crocodile tears, no doubt, and checked the texts. Vanessa had escalated. You think you're so high and mighty, you're nothing without us. I laughed, the sound harsh in the quiet apartment. Nothing. I'd built a career, a life, a reputation, all while she played parasite. But Nate's next message gave me pause. Vanessa's telling Ethan you bailed because you don't care about him. I tried to stop her, but she's out of control. My stomach twisted. Using Ethan as a pawn? That was low, even for her. I fired back. Tell Ethan I'll see him soon. This isn't about him. Nate's reply was a single word. Thanks. I leaned back, staring at the ceiling. Vanessa could spin her lies, but I wouldn't let her poison Ethan's view of me. I needed to act, but not yet. Let her stew, let her feel the void where my money used to be. That evening I drove past my sister's house, not to confront her, but to gauge the damage. The once pristine lawn was littered with deflated balloons, the happy 8th birthday banner sagging like a defeated flag. Vanessa's Tesla was still in the driveway, but the vibe was different, tense, chaotic. Through the window, I saw her pacing, phone to her ear, her face twisted in fury. I rolled down my window just enough to catch her voice, shrill and desperate. I don't care, Mom. He's doing this to ruin me. I bit back a laugh. Ruin her? She'd done that herself. Then I saw Nate, sitting at the dining table, his head in his hands. He looked broken, a man drowning in his wife's chaos. I felt a pang of sympathy. He didn't sign up for this, but it wasn't my job to save him. I drove off. The image of Vanessa's unraveling burned into my mind. Back home, my phone buzzed again. Nate. She's selling the Tesla tomorrow. She's losing it. I smirked, typing back, good, maybe she'll learn something. But I knew better. Vanessa didn't learn. She lashed out. The next day, I got a call from an unexpected source. My old high school friend Jamal, now a lawyer in Richmond. "Yo, man," he said, his voice warm but cautious. "Your mom called me. She's freaking out, saying you've abandoned the family. What's going on?" I sighed, filling him in on the party, Vanessa's betrayal, the whole ugly mess. Jamal whistled. "Damn, that's cold. You know your sister's always been a user. You need to cut that cord for real." I nodded, even though he couldn't see me. "Working on it. But Ethan, he's stuck in the middle." Jamal paused, then said, "Look, if you want to help the kid without feeding Vanessa's ego, set up a trust for him. I can hook you up with someone to make it airtight. She won't touch a cent." The idea hit like a lightning bolt. A trust for Ethan, direct, untouchable, a way to be there without playing Vanessa's game. "You're a genius," I said, already planning. "Send me the contact." As I hung up, I felt a shift, a clarity I hadn't had in days. Vanessa could scream, sell her car, beg for scraps. It didn't matter. I was done being her ATM. But Ethan? I'd fight for him on my terms. I glanced at my laptop, the code still waiting. For the first time since the party, I felt like I could breathe. The storm was far from over, but I was ready for it. Vanessa wanted a war. She'd get one, just not the one she expected. The humid Virginia air clung to my skin as I sat in my apartment, the glow of my monitor casting shadows across the room. It had been a week since I'd stormed out of Ethan's birthday party, leaving Vanessa's venomous words, "No place for losers," to fester like an open wound. My phone, once a relentless barrage of missed calls and texts, had gone eerily quiet. The silence was both a relief and a warning, like the calm before a hurricane. At 32, I'd finally cut the financial cord that tethered me to my family's greed, but the fallout was just beginning. Vanessa's perfect world built on my money was crumbling, and I was savoring every crack. I leaned back in my chair, sipping a lukewarm coffee, my eyes flicking between lines of code and the memory of Nate's last text. "She's selling the Tesla tomorrow. She's losing it." The image of Vanessa, the queen of appearances, forced to pawn her status symbol was deliciously ironic. For years, she'd mocked my practical Honda, my thrift store tees, my loser life, all while burning through my cash to prop up her Instagram-worthy facade. Now, with her safety net gone, she was flailing, but I wasn't naive. Vanessa didn't break. She lashed out, and I knew she'd come for me soon. My phone buzzed, snapping me out of my thoughts. A new message from Nate. "It's bad. She's blaming everyone but herself. Ethan's confused, keeps asking why you're not around." My chest tightened. Ethan, with his gap-toothed grin and endless curiosity, was the collateral damage in this war. Vanessa's lie, that I'd bailed because I didn't care, gnawed at me. I typed back, "Tell him I'm here. I'll fix this my way." Nate's reply was a thumbs-up emoji, a small gesture from a man drowning in his wife's chaos. I set the phone down and opened my banking app, scrolling through the trust fund paperwork Jamal had sent. The plan was simple, a savings account for Ethan locked until he turned 18, with me as the sole contributor. Vanessa wouldn't touch a cent, and Nate had promised to keep it secret. It wasn't just about money. It was about giving Ethan a future free from his mother's entitlement. I signed the digital forms, my fingers steady despite the storm in my head. This was my line in the sand, a way to stay in Ethan's life without feeding Vanessa's ego. But the victory felt hollow. I couldn't shake the image of Ethan's confusion, his small voice asking why his uncle had vanished. I needed to see him, to reassure him, but Vanessa's house was a minefield. That's when Aunt Carla's name resurfaced, her gravelly warning from years ago echoing like a lifeline. "Don't let them bleed you dry." I pulled up the website for Carla's Roadhouse in Charleston, its gritty charm a stark contrast to Maplewood's manicured perfection. A photo showed Carla behind the bar, her silver hair tied back, her smirk defiant. She'd escaped our family's toxic orbit. Maybe she could show me how to do the same. I booked a motel in Charleston for the weekend, a 6-hour drive I hoped would clear my head. But before I could pack, my doorbell rang. Sharp, insistent, like a fist demanding entry. I checked the peephole, my stomach twisting. Vanessa. She stood on my doorstep, her designer sunglasses perched on her head, her face a mask of barely contained rage. I considered ignoring her, letting her stew, but curiosity won. I wanted to see her squirm. I opened the door, leaning against the frame with a lazy smirk. "No Tesla in the driveway," I said, my voice dripping with mock surprise. "What's the occasion?" Her eyes flashed, her jaw clenching so tight I could hear her teeth grind. "You think this is funny?" she spat, stepping closer. "You think you can just walk away and ruin everything?" I crossed my arms, unfazed. "Ruin? Oh, sis, you did that all on your own? Overspending on a petting zoo and a cake you couldn't afford? That's not my mess." Her face flushed crimson, her hands balling into fists. "You're so pathetic," she hissed. "You think you're some big shot because you write code in your sad little apartment? Ethan doesn't need you. We don't need you." The lie stung, but I saw through her. She was desperate, her perfect life unraveling without my checks to stitch it together. "Funny," I said, tilting my head. "You didn't say that when you were begging for tuition money, or when I paid for your car repairs, or when—" "Shut up," she screamed, her voice cracking. "You're selfish. You don't care about Ethan, about family." I laughed, a cold, bitter sound that made her flinch. "Family? You mean the people who called me a loser and kicked me out of my nephew's party? Yeah, real tight-knit crew." She opened her mouth, but no words came. For the first time, I saw it. Fear. Not of me, but of the void I'd left. Without my money, her house of cards was collapsing. I stepped closer, my voice low and deliberate. "You made your choice, Vanessa. You wanted no place for losers. Well, guess what? This loser's done funding your life." I shut the door in her face, her stunned silence louder than any tantrum. My heart pounded, a mix of adrenaline and triumph. But as I sank onto the couch, Ethan's face crept back into my mind. I needed to make sure he was okay, and I needed to do it soon. The next day I drove to Charleston, the open road a welcome escape from Richmond's suffocating memories. Carla's Roadhouse was everything the website promised. A weathered brick building with a flickering neon sign, motorcycles parked out front, and the faint thump of classic rock spilling into the street. I stepped inside, the air thick with the scent of fried onions and whiskey. Carla stood behind the bar, her leather vest and sharp eyes unmistakable. She looked up, her smirk fading into surprise. "Well, I'll be damned," she said, her voice rough but warm. "Little coder kid, all grown up." I grinned, sliding onto a stool. "Not so little anymore. And you're still running this place like a boss." She laughed, pouring me a bourbon without asking. "Damn right. What brings you here? Your mom's not exactly sending Christmas cards." I took a sip, the burn steadying me, and spilled the story. The party, Vanessa's betrayal, my parents' complicity, Ethan's confusion. Carla listened, her face hardening with every word. "Sounds like Patricia and her golden girl haven't changed," she said, wiping down the bar. "They're leeches, kid. Always have been. You're smart to cut 'em off, but it ain't easy. They'll guilt you, claw at you, anything to keep you hooked." I nodded, the weight of her words settling in. "I'm done with the money," I said. "But Ethan, he's just a kid. I can't abandon him." Carla leaned forward, her eyes piercing. "Then don't. Be there for him. But don't let Vanessa near your wallet. Set boundaries, hard ones, and don't expect your parents to back you up. They're too busy kissing her ass." Her bluntness was a jolt, but it was exactly what I needed. We talked for hours, her stories of breaking free from the family's expectations a roadmap for my own escape. By the time I left, I felt lighter, armed with a plan. Protect Ethan, stay firm, and never let Vanessa's claws sink in again. Back in Richmond, the storm hit. Nate called, his voice tight. "Vanessa's gone nuclear. She's telling everyone you're a deadbeat, that you're punishing Ethan to spite her, and she's talking about moving to Florida. taking him with her. My blood ran cold. Florida, she was running, trying to erase me from Ethan's life entirely. She's not taking him anywhere, I said, my voice steel. I'll handle it. I called Jamal, my lawyer friend, and laid out the situation. Can she just up and leave with Ethan? I asked. Jamal's voice was calm but firm. Not without Nate's consent, and he's not on board. If she tries, we can file for an emergency custody order, but you need to talk to Nate, get him to stand up to her. I thanked him, my mind racing. Nate was spineless around Vanessa, but he cared about Ethan. If I could push him to act, we could keep Ethan close. That evening, I met Nate at a coffee shop, a neutral ground away from Vanessa's chaos. He looked haggard, his eyes bloodshot, his hands fidgeting with a napkin. She's out of control, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. She sold the Tesla, but the money's already gone. Bills, credit cards, her image. Now she's talking about starting over in Florida, like that'll fix anything. I leaned forward, my voice steady. Nate, you can't let her take Ethan. He needs stability, not her delusions. Fight for him. He nodded, but his shoulders slumped. I know, but she's relentless. And your parents are backing her, saying it's a fresh start. I scoffed, the betrayal stinging fresh. Of course they were. They'd always coddled Vanessa, excusing her every failure. Then you need to be relentless, I said. I've got a trust set up for Ethan and I'm not going anywhere, but you have to step up. Something shifted in Nate's eyes, a flicker of resolve. Okay, he said, his voice firmer. I'll talk to a lawyer. I'm done letting her run the show. I clapped his shoulder, a rare moment of camaraderie. For the first time, I felt like we were on the same side. As I drove home, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from Vanessa. Her voice was a mix of rage and desperation. You think you've won? You're nothing, and Ethan will forget you. Enjoy your pathetic life. I deleted it, her words bouncing off me like rain on asphalt. She was unraveling, and I was free. But the fight for Ethan was just beginning, and I was ready to play dirty if I had to. The Richmond skyline glittered against the October dusk, a mosaic of lights that felt like a quiet victory. 9 months had passed since I'd walked away from Ethan's birthday party. Vanessa's cruel words, no place for losers, still a faint scar but no longer a bleeding wound. At 32, I'd severed the financial umbilical cord that bound me to my family's greed, and the silence that followed was a revelation. No more desperate texts from Vanessa, no more guilt-tripping voicemails from my mother, no more spineless platitudes from my father. For the first time in years, I was free, not just from their demands, but from the suffocating need to prove my worth. My apartment, once a chaotic shrine to late-night coding sessions, was now a sanctuary. The desk was clear, save for my laptop and a framed photo of Ethan and me at a science museum, his eyes wide as he marveled at a robot I'd programmed to wave. The trust fund for him was growing, a silent promise that he'd have a future beyond his mother's chaos. But the journey to this peace had been a war, and the final battles were etched in my memory. After Vanessa's threat to flee to Florida with Ethan, I'd doubled down. Nate, spurred by our coffee shop talk, had found his spine. He hired a lawyer, filed for joint custody, and blocked Vanessa's impulsive move. She'd raged, of course, her social media erupting with vague, melodramatic posts about betrayal and toxic people. But the court saw through her. Nate got primary custody, and Ethan stayed in Richmond, close enough for me to be the uncle he deserved. Vanessa, humiliated, retreated to a rented condo, her once glamorous life reduced to a shadow of itself. I'd expected her to come crawling back, but she didn't. Instead, she doubled down on her narrative, painting me as the villain to anyone who'd listen. My parents, predictably, took her side. One evening, my mother called, her voice thick with forced warmth. "Sweetheart, we're having a family dinner Saturday. It's time you and Vanessa work this out. Ethan needs his family whole." I laughed, the sound sharp enough to cut glass. "Whole? You mean the family that kicked me out of his party and called me a loser? No thanks, Mom." Her tone shifted, a familiar edge creeping in. Don't be cruel. Vanessa's struggling. She needs help. I leaned back in my chair, smirking. Struggling? You mean she's broke because I stopped paying her bills? That's not my problem. There was a pause, then a sigh. She's your sister. Family forgives. I shook my head, my voice cold. Family doesn't humiliate you for sport. You stood there, Mom. You let her do it. I'm done. I hung up, my pulse steady. It was the first time I'd ended a call with her, and it felt like shedding a weight I'd carried for decades. But Vanessa wasn't one to let go quietly. 2 days later, my doorbell rang. Bang, 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 like a hammer on steel. I checked the peephole, my lips curling into a grin. There she was, disheveled, her designer sunglasses gone, her face a storm of desperation and rage. I opened the door, leaning against the frame with mock ease. "No dinner at Mom's?" I asked, my voice dripping with sarcasm. Her eyes narrowed, her fists clenching. "Let me in," she demanded. I tilted my head, savoring the moment. "Why? Got another insult to throw, or are you here to beg?" Her nostrils flared, but she pushed forward, her voice low and urgent. "I need help, okay? Just a loan. I'm in trouble." I laughed, a cold, deliberate sound that made her flinch. "Trouble? You mean you burned through your credit cards and Mom's charity? That's not my circus, Vanessa." Her face crumpled, a mix of fury and panic. "You're heartless," she spat. "Ethan's suffering because of you." That was a low blow, and she knew it. I stepped closer, my voice a blade. "Don't you dare put Ethan on me. He's suffering because you tanked your life, not because I stopped cleaning up your messes." For a moment, she looked like she might scream, but then her shoulders sagged, her bravado crumbling. "I messed up," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I know I went too far. Just help me one last time." I studied her, searching for sincerity, but her eyes held the same entitled glint I'd seen for years. She wasn't sorry, she was cornered. I smiled, slow and deliberate. "I don't lend money," I said, pausing for effect. "I give it, to people who deserve it. You're not on that list." I patted her shoulder hard enough to make her stumble and shut the door. Her muffled curse echoed through the hall, but I was already walking away, my heart light. That was the last time Vanessa came to me. A week later, Nate texted, "She got a job. Retail, nothing fancy, but it's something." I nodded to myself. For the first time, Vanessa was standing on her own, whether she liked it or not, but freedom came with doubts. Late at night, as I debugged code or sipped whiskey, Ethan's face haunted me. Was I wrong to cut off my parents entirely? To leave him in a fractured family? I turned to Reddit, posting my story under a throwaway account. Aita for cutting off my entitled sister and parents, even if it means my nephew might feel the fallout. The responses flooded in, a chorus of support. NTA. Your sister made her bed. You're not Ethan's only lifeline. One comment stood out. Set up a way to connect with your nephew directly. Don't let your sister gatekeep him. The clarity hit like a spark. I texted Nate, arranging to take Ethan to a coding camp he'd been begging to attend. Vanessa couldn't stop me. She had no leverage now. The day I picked him up, his grin was brighter than the sun, his Spider-Man backpack bouncing as he ran to my car. "Uncle, you're back!" he shouted, hugging me tight. I ruffled his hair, my throat tight. "Always, kid. Just had to sort some stuff out." We spent the day building a simple game, his laughter washing away the last of my doubts. I was his uncle, not his ATM, and that was enough. Aunt Carla's advice echoed as I rebuilt my life. Set boundaries, hard ones. I did. My parents' calls went unanswered, their voicemails deleted. Vanessa's social media rants faded into irrelevance. Nate, now a tentative ally, kept me updated on Ethan, and the trust fund grew, a quiet promise for his future. I even started visiting Carla's roadhouse monthly, Her gritty wisdom a reminder that family isn't blood, it's who shows up. One night as I sipped bourbon in my apartment, my phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You ruined my life. Hope you're happy." Vanessa, no doubt, using a burner. I blocked it without a second thought, her words as empty as her threats. She was a ghost now, a fading echo of a life I'd left behind. I leaned back, the Richmond skyline sparkling through my window, and raised my glass. To freedom, to Ethan, to the man I'd become, not the loser they'd tried to define. And there you have it, folks. The story of how I broke free from a family that saw me as nothing but a paycheck. It wasn't easy and it wasn't pretty, but standing up for myself and protecting my nephew, Ethan, was worth every battle. I'm curious to hear your thoughts. What would you have done in my shoes? Would you have cut the cord like I did, or found another way to keep the peace? Drop your thoughts in the comments below and let's keep this conversation going. Oh, and one last thing. Please tell me where you're tuning in from. I love knowing where my listeners are hanging out, whether it's New York, California, or somewhere across the globe. Until next time, stay true to yourself, and I'll catch you in the next story.